Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Leaderonomics Show, a show that's been going on with Leaderonomics for such a long time that we've spoken to so many people we can't count anymore. And yes, the show is all about speaking to people who are subject matter experts in their area, world leaders, those who have done it, those who have felt it, and those who have experienced that they want to share with you. And the show is brought to you by Nicole and also Budaya. So, for everybody out there, wherever you are, maybe I should say good morning, or if you're seeing us from somewhere in the other corner in the world, good day, and hope that it will be a wonderful day wherever you are. And today, we're actually going to have a conversation with Alistair Gordon. You saw it at the start screen, the scroller screen. He's the co-author of a book that is out right now called Master Expert: How to Use Expertship to Achieve Peak Performance, Seniority, and Influence in a Technical Role. And he's also the CEO at Expertunity. I actually like that name, Expertunity, and also HFL Leadership. So he actually is working with a very highly dedicated team and fantastic cohort of external consultants and coaches focused on helping participants and clients organize how they work for themselves and how they reach their full potential. So maybe let's move away from all the pleasantries and let's bring him on because we want to talk to him. Hey, Alistair, how you doing?
Good morning. Good morning, Nigesh. Very well, thank you. Thank you for the invite.
No problem at all, Alistair. So I did the typical introduction just now, but I think it's better to hear from you. So let's start with your background. Like, tell us a bit more about yourself and what got you into this space of building capability.
Yeah, so I started, Nigesh, as a publisher many moons ago, and worked in lots of magazines in London and Singapore and Australia, and built a publishing business. And most of that publishing business actually was about producing magazines for technical subject matter experts, funnily enough, IT people in particular. But also finance people and marketing people. And then we built that business quite successfully and sold it. So a bit of an entrepreneurial background. And then I started mentoring, small businesses who wanted to grow and similarly have a liquidity event. And in one of the businesses that we found, we were looking for growth businesses to invest in. And one of those businesses was HFL Leadership, which is a leadership business, which we've been involved with for 15 years or so. But the Lotus and, as you referenced, the thing that we're really passionate about is this expertship initiative that we've taken and is growing rapidly, where we help subject matter experts really fulfill their potential. So I've kind of come full circle. I'm back with the experts.
Right. And that's a good story. So it's nice that how it kind of confluenced itself to where you are right now. So maybe on that, right, we were talking about experts, and experts usually means people who have the capability to go beyond the norm, those who have potential that can be fulfilled. But so everyone does have potential there, but most of the time they find it a little difficult to fulfill that, especially when they get bogged down by what they rather have to do rather than what they want to do. So how can they avoid themselves falling into the trap of being forced into doing certain things versus what they really want to pursue?
Yeah, I think it's, you're on the money. It's particularly technical subject matter experts typically have what we call deep domain knowledge. So they really have expertise, whether it's in IT or finance or HR or science or whatever it might be, lawyers for that matter. And they spend a lot of their time, Nigesh, learning how to be that technical expert. And they end up being the go-to person. The organization comes and asks them to solve problems. And because they're quite good at it, they get more and more problems to solve. And before they know it, all they're doing all day long is solving problems. All of our research suggests that most subject matter experts could add an enormous amount of more value to their organization, but they're so far focused on task that they don't really have that opportunity sometimes to put their head above the parapet and say, where could I add more value? How could I generate a better outcome than I am at the moment? And that's very much what the book and what we work with people about is helping them start fulfilling the potential that they know they've got, but they're very frustrated sometimes that they can't get to it because they're so busy doing tasks.
Right. And I understand what you're saying there, because I'm actually a graduate engineer, and I actually
Right.
was a subject matter expert in certain equipment when I was working as an engineer. I completely feel exactly what you said, because day in, day out, because you're the person that a person goes to when they have a problem, you're just fixing tasks. And
Yes.
only when I had the opportunity to actually say, like, look, move me away from being positioned as an SME of that particular thing, which I got the opportunity to think, how can I do things differently to actually make life better for other people as well? So you're completely right with that. I feel it completely. And perhaps that's where I want to explore a little bit about what your new book is about here. So from a little bit on the synopsis, I guess it shows how to achieve peak performance, influence, and seniority in a technical role. But what's the story behind it, and why do you believe this is a very important message that you need to get across to people?
Yeah, well, I think if some of your listeners are technical experts, they'll have had a similar experience to you. You're the lucky one, right? You escaped. You were given the opportunity to move on. There's lots of experts out there who, want to know how we make that happen. And, the story behind it is that, I was this leadership company that we bought. We were running lots of leadership programs. I was running a senior leadership program. And the CIO who was on the program came and said to me, Alistair, I've got a whole floor full of IT specialists who they don't need this leadership training, because you know what, they don't lead people, but they lead knowledge. And
Right.
a lot of these skills, are really, they're not very good necessarily at communicating, technical ideas to non-technical people. Sometimes their collaboration skills haven't been refined. So that's where this whole process began. And with our research and what have you, we've concluded a very simple thing, which is that, when you were an engineer, to just pick on you as an example, you would spend all of your time building your technical skills. And that was 100% of your focus, because, right, your technical skills are the ticket to the game, right, in most of your professions. But the piece that you didn't probably spend as much time on, although obviously you've acquired them now, is what I call enterprise skills, which is those sort of business skills that are, business acumen, collaboration, personal impact, good communication skills, good change skills, strategy, those sorts of really good skills. Most technical experts have not had time to acquire them. And sometimes actually they get the message from their organizations that they don't need them. They just, stay in your technical bubble, stay in your technical box. And so most organizations have a huge number of programs to develop their leaders, which is, I'm sure, a big focus of what you talk about on this podcast all the time. But they actually have very little other than more technical training for their technical experts. So leadership programs are for people leaders, but expertship programs are to help technical experts get good, not just technically, but also at those enterprise skills. And if you look around most organizations, the technical experts that are most valuable, most influential, have most impact, contributing most to innovation are the people who are good at technical skills, technically brilliant, but also have those enterprise skills and can influence the rest of the business to give them the resources to build the new future, to build new customer value. So that's the piece.
Right. But while you were saying that, something came to mind, because you're right. Most of the time, people invest in what they call soft skills or transferable skills, as they want to say it, right?
Yes.
And you try to shoehorn or force fit people to go and do those kind of things, and especially technical people. You're absolutely right. When you ask them to do those things, for them, it really is very alien to them, and they feel, am I supposed to practice this?
You're so right. You're so right.
And sooner or later, what starts happening is they come into this real weird gray area, and then they find themselves lost. Like, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to be a technical person? Am I supposed to be this? And the other effect that I see happening is when a company spends a bit too much time just developing these kind of skills, which are important, behavioral skills, which are important, they move the company too much to one corner and they lose the technical capabilities. And then they have to kind of backtrack again and go back to the technical capabilities. So I just got an additional question here from what we spoke. Maybe for someone who is a technical person, right? What is the one thing that you feel that they can do immediately to help themselves to gain those enterprise skills? Like the first question they got to ask themselves to kind of trigger the next process for them to start gaining the enterprise skills.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think so. Let's agree a couple of things. Most technical experts are very smart, right? You don't get to the top of your technical expertise. You're dealing with super complex either machines or processes or what have you. So you're smart. So it's not about smarts. And this whole concept that some people have that, oh, you're an expert, so you're good with machines, but you're not good with people. That's just rubbish. The data doesn't support it at all. So the issue is, I think most experts, the one thing would be to ask themselves, what is getting in the way of me being more influential than I currently am? And maybe even getting some feedback on that, I would suggest, Nagesh, because typically what happens is that experts are in this role where they're rolled in to solve a problem and then they're rolled out again. So anyone selling any form of software or something like that, there's the sort of salesy, businessy person who has these soft skills that you're talking about, and they come in and they're really nice to the client and they tell the client how it's going to be great, and then the client asks a technical question about the product or software, and so in comes the expert who explains it. They may explain it reasonably well. They may much more likely overcomplicate the explanation. They may use the opportunity to prove just how expert they actually are. And very quickly the business person says, oh, okay, thank you, that's enough, right, enough, off you go, and they carry on. So I would ask myself the question, if I'm a technical expert, what's getting in the way of me being more influential? And generally the answer to that question is, it's the way I communicate. I'm not thinking about who I'm communicating with and actually what they want to know, as opposed to what I want to tell them. And secondly, I don't understand what their needs are. So I have a stakeholder, but I haven't really understood what they're hoping to get from me. So that those two pieces of self-reflection would be where I would begin. But obviously it's a bigger story than that in general.
Of course. Yeah. And
can I just comment on something that you mentioned earlier on, Nagesh, which is really interesting. So you talked about experts being shoehorned into programs that were not really designed for them. And this is just almost most experts I know have had this experience. Maybe they've lost their temper, at a meeting, or they've been a little bit direct with, a senior person or what have you. And so someone complains about them and the HR team says, you know what they need? They need a course on emotional intelligence, And so suddenly this expert finds themselves, nominated and enrolled in an emotional intelligence course. No one's told them why. No one's given them any feedback. And of course, they sit at the back. And a lot of the emotional intelligence courses are designed to be for people leaders. So they keep going on about, the people that report to you and what have you. And the expert's sitting at the back of the room, usually with arms crossed like this, saying, I'm going to kill whoever nominated me for this, number one. If they're a technical person, they'll probably, delete their network access or something in retribution. But they're also saying, what has this got to do with me? I don't have a team. And actually, I don't want to be emotional. The whole point is I'm a technical specialist. I need to be cold, calm, collected, calculating. This is just not for me. And of course, the truth is that those soft skills that you're talking about are very important. But the expert needs to understand why they're important to them being a better expert. And that's the gap, I think, that most organizations, the mistake that most organizations make. And that's why a lot of experts, the last thing they ever want to do is to go on any form of a leadership course, because they just think it's irrelevant to them.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what you just said there from personal experience. Funny when you said that whole, they would probably speak their mind, probably step on someone's shoes and anger somebody. I've been exactly there. I've done that, being a subject matter expert, a technical expert. And I think the one thing I thank, I remember this part, then my director, who is a Salvadorian guy and also my mentor in the company as well. So the step that happened to me was I wasn't pushed into a program. Instead, I was taken off for my role from where I was live in the production floor to now coordinate an overall equipment sort of non-frontline kind of thing. And they explained to me why that was happening and what they wanted me to start understanding. And that helped because that made me start thinking differently. And then what you said came to mind, which was when I felt I needed a particular skill, I went up and asked, like, hey, you know what? I need this skill right now because there's this group of people I need to talk to. I understand what you're doing. Now it makes sense to me. So I think I like your point there where it's not about just taking the person and putting them there, taking the right action so that the person understands why they are going to be doing that and how that adds value to themselves.
Yeah, the sequence is important. And, the way in which the context is provided, is critically important. And, to give you a sense of this, I'm going to use an example of IT, but, in some of our programs, what we do is, we sort of say I'm doing a group of IT people just recently, and I sort of said to them, how do you know what the business needs from you? And they say, well, we ask the business. There's pretty much always the answer. And then I asked the group, okay, so when it comes to IT, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you as the IT group know how much IT could add to the value of the organization? And they go, well, we're experts, like 9, 10, 10 and a half, someone will say. And I say, okay. And then when you think of the business leaders, the non-IT people, how much on a scale of 1 to 10 do they know how IT could add to the value of the organization? And typically the IT team will sort of sit back and laugh and roll their eyes and say, they don't even know how to use their mobile phones properly. They've got no idea. It's a 1 or a 2 at best. And I say, okay, so let me just get this right then. So what IT can add to value it can add to the organization. The business doesn't, but you're asking them what you can do for the business. Can you explain that logically to me? It just doesn't make any sense. And of course, the thing is, they're asking the wrong questions.
Right.
They shouldn't be asking the business about IT. They should be asking the business about what keeps them awake at night. What do their customers need right now? What will their customers need in 2 years' time? What are the competitors offering? What could we offer that's better than There's a whole range of business questions that those IT experts need to be able to ask the business in order to figure out how they can add real value. And that's the sort of the penny dropping to say, I need more than just, there's so much more to being a technology person than just technology skills. You need to understand what the technology is doing, the competitive value that it's offering and delivering.
All right. All right. That's actually quite a good point over there. Like how or what kind of question you should be asking. All right. And speaking of questions, so I'm gonna do this little plug right now for you on the book itself. So actually, because we are going to talk a little bit more about the book later, but can we have the splash screen of the book so you can see it? There you go. So that's the book right there. And so it's a co-authored book, Alistair Gordon and also Dominic Johnson. The Age of Experts is here. Master Expert: How to Use Expertship to Achieve Peak Performance, Seniority and Influence in a Technical Role. So do go ahead, and if you want to get the book, the easiest way you can get it is go on to Amazon and just search for Master Expert. But also there's a link as well if you want to use. There you go. That's the link right there. Expertship.com to get your copy of Master Expert. So 2 ways, that link or Amazon. All right. Now, before we start moving to the next segment, so I'm going to pause the questions for a while because I'm going to play a little game with you here. But I want to let everyone who's watching the show right now, you can be part of the question. You can ask questions. So do ask your questions. If you're watching this from either LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, just leave your questions in the comment. Or if you just want to say hi to Alistair and, of course, hi to me as well, you can do so. All right. Okay. So, Alistair, we're going to play a little game with you. Can we have the video? All right, so this game is called Thinkonomics, Alistair, and this game is actually based on. It's actually a card game with sort of a time sand thing. It's based on our 5 values in Leaderonomics, which is empowering, relationships, growth, giving, building the future. So typically, if we're live in front of each other, there'll be a stack of cards, and you kind of pick from there. But since we can't pick a stack of cards, we have pre-picked the questions for you. And apparently I'm supposed to be the judge to say whether you got it right or not. And you will have 60 seconds to answer as many as you can. And we will see how many you get. All right. Are you ready, Alistair?
I'm as ready as I'm ever going to be, I think.
Ready as you're ever going to be. All right. If you're ready, our producer, Shashi, if you're ready with the music and the timer, we will go in 3, 2, 1. Can we have the first question? All right. Question number 1. Is it possible for society to be overdeveloped? What do you think, Alistair?
I think it might be in some instances. I think when you consider the things that we consume that we don't need to consume, the plastics we produce that are filling up our oceans, there are many, many ways where slightly simpler solutions are better for us longer term. So I think the answer is yes.
All right, let's go on to question 2. Do you think it is all right to always give but not receive anything in return?
Yes, I do, because I think you eventually do receive something in return, even if it's not visible. As an example, you've just referenced earlier on your mentor who gave you an opportunity. You're giving back to that person right now. They might not know it, but you absolutely are every day in terms of the way you're delivering more value. So the answer is yes, it's fine.
All right. Question 3. What do you think is the next great invention that will change the world?
Really effective driverless cars will change everything. They'll change our cities, they'll change our health, they'll change the way we spend spare time. They'll, just think of all those multi-story car parks we won't need in the cities. I'd say driverless car will be the next great thing.
All right. And we probably have, we already reached time. We've got one last question which we can ask you. One last question. Let's go to it. What is the most important ingredient for you to establish a strong relationship?
I think empathy in terms of where that other person is coming from.
Empathy. All right, great. So thank you, Alistair. You got 4 questions. How many questions did we have, actually? I think we had about 6, if I'm not mistaken. No, we had 5 questions. You answered 4 out of 5. Great. Congratulations, Alistair. Nice. Nicely done. I want to say that you are a winner of this Thinkonomics challenge. Since it's objective, I'll say that you're a winner. And for that, we're going to send you over, since we're talking about a book, we are going to send you over a PDF copy of a book. This is Roshan's book, Leadership Nuggets. Awesome. A lot of stories that of people Roshan has spoken to in this book, little nuggets of leadership from all the conversations he has had. So that'll be coming to you right after the show. Thank you so much, Alistair, for that.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Right. And now let's get back to some questions around the book and also about you. So I've got this because we spoke a little bit about the thought process, how a technical expert can start increasing his sphere of influence in a way, right? But talk us through that crucible moment in your life that led you towards this path, and also the part of what you perceive as your success right now.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and is there one moment? I think probably the moment that sort of led me to where I am now is that I learned the power of the right question at the right time for the right reason. I think. I remember the very first thing that I did that was successful was to launch a magazine, and I'd previously done for IT people, and I'd previously done a survey of IT readers and asked them, would you like a new magazine? Another. They already had 35, I think, in Australia at the time, and the survey came back and said, no, the last thing we need is a 36th IT magazine. But fortunately, we asked some other questions in that survey about, what they read, what they found most valuable, what they didn't, find valuable. And so some of those subsidiary questions at the end of the day led us to produce a magazine that was almost instantly successful because we'd really closely listened to customers. So I think, and it's the same really with expertship. We've done a lot of research into asking experts what gets in the way of them learning those enterprise skills. And, I think understanding that has really helped us shape something that's useful for people.
Right. And let's now hone in back again to the book of yours, right? Master Expert. And the hopes, and if I'm getting this right, it's the hopes to transform the value add of technical subject matter experts without giving too much away. Could you share with us some practical techniques? We already kind of touched that when I asked you the question, what's that first thing subject matter expert or a technical person can do? And it's asking, again, you went back to asking that right question. But is there anything else that right after that they can start doing that probably you can share without revealing too much, because we do want people to read your book?
Yes, well, I'm very happy to share, and it's a great question. I think the way things work for a lot of experts, not everybody, but for a lot of experts, is they kind of hit what I call the technical ceiling.
Right.
It's that sort of getting stuck piece that we were referring to earlier on, Yogesh, about, they become so important to the organization that, the person who goes and solves all the problems, whether it's engineering in your case, or it's finance or law, that they just can't get out of their technical bubble. So the critical thing I think for experts to do is to think about what do they need to know on a more broader basis about their organization. They need to become a student of their organization. They need to become a student of the organization's customers, whether that's the community in public sector or its customers in commercial. They need to become a student of their competitors. They need to become a student of, world trends and what world trends are going to arrive on their doorstep and transform their industry. And as soon as they start really thinking much more broadly about the impact that their particular specialism is having and what it might have in the future, I think they have a better opportunity to ask exactly those sort of questions that you're talking about, where, if we could do this twice as good as we could do it now, how would we go about that? And our customers are buying our products right now because they like A, B, and C, but what's going to be on their criteria list for purchasing it in a year's time? It might be E, F, and G, and where are we at with that? So I think becoming a business person as well as a technical person is the sweet spot for experts, and that's where I would start if I were them. And obviously in the book there's lots of processes and models and what have you that they can adopt to do that. And if I'm allowed a second answer, it would be get to know your stakeholders. Really get to know them. Sit down and ask them, what their KPIs are, what's important to them, what makes their blood boil, what are they looking for? The more experts don't just take the order from their stakeholders, but seek to understand why the request is coming in the first place. That's usually the key moment where they're potentially able to begin to imagine even greater value they could deliver to the business person. Because generally speaking, a lot of experts tell us that the business turns up and tells them what they want the IT team or the engineering team to design, which is crazy. Like the IT team and the engineering, they're the experts about design. 9 times out of 10, the business doesn't really know what it wants. And if you ask the right questions, that creates an environment where you're able to add a lot more value. And as soon as you do that, people start looking at you differently. They start listening to you differently. They start giving you more resources. They start inviting you to the meetings you've always wanted to be invited to, the strategy piece, the innovation piece. So magic things happen as soon as you can demonstrate the ability to add a bit more value.
Right. I've got a full-on question from that. And this is involving the experts and probably the management, those who work with the experts in the first place. So most experts from my experience here in Malaysia, I'm not sure how it is out there as well, but here in Malaysia, most don't speak up because they're scared that if I speak out and say something right now, that would mean that, okay, this is going to be a new project that management will want me to lead, and then would want me to lead a group of people, which I don't want to lead a group of people. So my question here is this. Most experts or most subject matter technical people are adverse to working with a group of people. Not in the sense that they don't want to work with others, but they don't want to lead others. They don't want to tell others, like, you do this, you do this, you do this, or coordinate, because that's not their domain. So how can they reframe their mind when it comes to working with others? And also at the same time, for their management, when an expert comes up and tells them, look, here's potentially something that I've observed, data has showed that it could add value to the business and the company, how can management reframe their approach and how they set up the way forward, like the project team or something like that, versus just simply saying that, oh, great, you brought that up, so you're going to lead this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think most experts feel it's a binary choice, right? You either stay an expert or you become a people leader. And most experts take a look at people leaders and they're not interested. They don't, they're spending all that time in all those meetings and I guess, just hopeless.
Yeah.
I mean, they want to do real work.
Yeah.
There is, of course, a third way and a fourth way. The third way is to sort of become part of a project group and maybe an informal leader, a joint leader of that group that's trying to solve a problem. And the other way is to become, a guru, if you like, become a master expert, which is pretty much what the book is about, and be someone who's advising the leaders on what should be done and what have you. They're providing their input. The majority of leaders who come on our programs certainly don't come on the basis that they want to become people leaders, but about 1 in 5 of them do. Because they suddenly realize that actually the skills that these people leaders have got, they're pretty easy actually to acquire if you've decided you want to acquire them. So, but in terms of people, making a suggestion, I think my observation is that a lot of experts have an idea or have a thought or have a question, but because they don't know the answer or they're not absolutely sure the answer is right, they don't ask it. And they don't ask it because they don't want to look not expert. Whereas people leaders ask questions they don't know the answers to every single minute of the day, right? And so I think overcoming that, and again, it's the ability to ask a question. Is there an opportunity for us to get more value from X? Or if we were to approach this in a slightly different way, would we end up with a better outcome? You're positing ideas without saying you know the answer. And again, that suddenly means that subject matter experts are adding way more value in the meetings they're in, and people are looking at them differently and saying, "Wow, that's great. You've really made us think differently." So how would we progress? So I think it's a bit of a mental barrier for a few experts to get over. I think you're right.
And as you're mentioning that, I like when you said part of a joint team as a joint leader. I think that thought process is important as well, because then from a management side, because this is a tendency that happens. If you have someone who's really good at something within a team, everybody else would say, that guy is good, so he's probably going to do most of it. That passenger syndrome starts happening. So it really needs that joint leadership where there's one person kind of doing the coordination of who's going to do what, setting the expectation, knowing that each has their responsibility, and not to throw everything on this guy who, yes, knows the stuff. Yes, is there to advise. Yes, is there to do the hardest thing, but not to do everything. So I think it's very important for that setup to be there as well, to support an expert. And that gives the expert the opportunity to learn that people skills, if you want to call it.
And on that sort of a team, let's say the expert's been doing it for 15 years, I guess. So, everyone says, oh, well, he or she must be the expert. But, let's imagine it's a she for a moment. So there's this lady who has 15 years of top-notch expertise. But when you consider how dynamic our world is, how many years experience are actually still relevant? How much has changed in the last 18 months? how much has changed for good in the last 18 months? What sort of things are we doing today as absolute normal that we would never have imagined we would be doing normally last February? Hundreds of things. So the problem with being really a great expert with 15 years experience for this lady is, how current is it? And is she imagining what might be the right solution in 2 years' time? And is it going to be different from what's the right solution now? Almost certainly will be. So that expertise can be a barrier and an impediment to actually adding value, because it's just too easy. Oh, what I did 5 years ago worked, let's do it again. Well, we live in a world where that's not going to cut it, is it?
All right. That's a good thought there, because what those words are screaming into my head is, don't just solve today's problem as an expert. You're actually there to solve tomorrow's problem. Think and solve tomorrow's problem.
Yeah. And the difference between a technical expert and a master expert, which we describe in some detail in the book, is that, the expert tends to be quite transactional, quite in the moment, getting stuff done. Go right back to your very first question, Nigresh, about, task versus, outcomes. Right. Whereas a master expert is likely to be thinking longer term, thinking externally, thinking about what might be coming down the line. A lot of experts are building stuff that's is going to be ready in 9 months or a year's time and has to last for 3. So if we're not imagining what is going to be needed in 4 years' time, we're almost certainly under designing the exercise. So the big challenge for experts is to stop jumping to solution, because they need to be expedient. They need to get stuff done. So, what Nigresh just talked to me about sounds like solution number 26. So that's what it is. When actually, if I'd spent some time talking to you, I'd have discovered it was a 26A with a bit of a 27 in it. Just taking that slightly extra amount of time to really explore what is the problem. And even though it sounds like 26, you know what? It's not. That's the difference between an expert and a master expert. And there's nothing intellectually challenging about that other than technique. It's just technique.
And speaking of technique, I want to bring up this question that came in. So you recognize this name. I'm not afraid to break the fourth wall. This is actually a question coming from our producer himself. So he's curious to ask this question.
Okay, awesome.
So he's thanking you for all the sharing that you're doing right now. So he's got this question. Do you think that we or they get this is for subject or master experts, right? Do you think that we or they get in our own way sometimes, or is it all about the processes in place and the general working environment? I think you kind of answered a few of those during our session, but what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, it's a fundamental question and a great question, because organizations are not set up typically to get the best out of subject matter experts. All of their talent processes and where they invest in developing people's skills and what have you tend to be orientated around people leaders. And that means that those organizations are not leveraging the potential of subject matter experts. And, that ends up being, a real problem for experts, because they don't have the career paths and opportunities and development opportunities that the people on the people leader stream have. But of course, the experts, as Shashi is suggesting, the experts don't help themselves, because they sort of tend to blame the organization. They don't get on the front foot. They assume it's everybody else's fault that I can't reach my potential, not mine. And I think they do. At the beginning of our programs, Nigresh, we ask people, is your work valued as it should be in your organization? No. Do people really understand what value you create? No, they've got no idea. Do senior leaders, respect all the work you do? Not really. And we ask them, whose fault is that? And they say it's 100% the organization's fault. And we go, really? Now, Nigresh, you're an engineer, so you may be slightly unusual in the sense that it has to be 100% right for engineers, otherwise the bridge falls down, right? But for most of the rest of us, it's never 100 versus 0. And so I sort of say to them, so you're giving me 100% versus 0%. Absolutely, you don't contribute to this at all. It's 100% the organization's fault. And because most experts are smart enough to know 100 zero is unlikely statistically,
Yeah.
you know, they sort of say, well, maybe I've got a little bit of a contribution. And okay, well, you know, what are you willing to give me? You know, 5%. By the end of the program, they understand it's 60-40, that the organization, if they're waiting for the organization to change without them demonstrating they can add way more value, it's never going to happen. So the experts have to step forward first, and then, you know, the organization usually pretty quickly catches up.
And I think that's a super awesome advice over there. Actually, that was going to be my last question, but you kind of already answered it, which reminds me of the journey I went on, and I see a few others going on as well. People who I know who have been technical experts who went out of their way to actually understand different aspects of it, because it's like you sitting in a cocoon yourself, and you're sitting just there dealing with that one thing day in, day out, and you're not looking at what's happening around you and saying, oh, this is not working because I'm not getting this. This is not working because I'm not getting this. This is not working because I'm not getting this. But when you start stepping out, going back to what you said, asking the right questions, exploring what the enterprise and the business is all about, you start getting an appreciation of why is it that I'm not getting what I wanted? So what is the opportunity here to learn and do something different? Could it be, like example, could it be a cost-saving measure or a project that we could do because it's too expensive to get this particular equipment or this particular software? What is the solution around it? Which then adds value back to the business, which then gives me what I need. So that experience came along as we started exploring different avenues, and me going into business, marketing, and so on and so forth gave me that thought. And I see that same thing happening to a lot of these kind of technical subject matter experts who've stepped out and started exploring, and they get a full different appreciation of how exactly to be that, as you said, master expert. So I think that's a huge point that you just mentioned over there, which I kind of want to ensure that's the last very good point everyone gets as they listen to this show.
Yeah, I think the advice really is to, you know, be proactive, you know, be ambitious. I think start today. Just start doing, you know, look around your organization and figure out who knows more about marketing or sales or customers or whatever it might be than you do, and go and hang out with them and ask them, you know, what keeps them awake at night. The ability for an expert, actually, once they've decided to get out of their technical bubble, to get out, is it's a fantastic journey. And the vast majority of experts that we work with, nothing to do with us particularly, but they say it's so fulfilling because suddenly they feel that they can add more value, and of course they become more valuable, both to their organization and in the market as well.
Yeah. All right. So Shashi, the producer behind there, I know I'm going to push it a little bit because we started getting questions from one of our audience members, and I want to bring that up. Let's bring up both the questions. The first one first, and this is actually from someone we know. Her name is Eva Lim. So she asked first the question: can audience participate in the game as well by leaving their comments here? Eva, yes, you can. Yes, you can. But you got to be part of the show to win the book. Too bad. But she's got another question. She actually got a question for you, Alistair, here. So in your opinion, how would you convince senior management to adapt a new approach if they are used to the existing methods of handling issues at work, such as being data-driven instead of being empathetic?
Yeah, so it's a very good question, and obviously we work on both sides of the fence, Eva. And you know, we work with people leaders and senior leaders. So senior leaders tend to be obsessed by, if they're in the commercial space, they tend to be obsessed by growth. So, you know, they want the business to be more successful and what have you. And data tells you one thing, but, you know, making sure that your employees, for example, are really engaged, which requires empathy. You know, the data is really, actually, it's a data-driven thing, isn't it, really? Because the data is really clear. Highly engaged workforces produce great things. But, you know, when it comes to, you know, energizing their experts, you know, we ask senior leaders to look around the world at the companies that appear to have the greatest competitive advantage. You know, and some of these companies, you know, roll off our tongues pretty easily, like, you know, Alphabet, Google, Amazon, and we've got a local company doing really well here called Atlassian in Australia, which is now a global player. Lots and lots. I'm sure you've got lots of Malaysian ones as well. But if you really, from an engineering perspective, Nigesh, think about Arup, for example, global leader in engineering solutions. What is it about those organizations that give them the competitive edge? And it's their experts in every single instance. And it's the way they look after their experts. And in fact, when you look at a place like Google, you can go up to level 10 and you can be an individual contributor as an expert at level 10, almost earning the same money as, some of the CEOs of business divisions, just as an expert. They really look after and leverage their experts, and that creates competitive advantage. It's not just all about the numbers. It's about, really understanding what customers are going to want to buy from us in a couple of years' time. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for answering that. So, Alistair, we've actually come to the end of the show. Unfortunately, we can always manage our task. We can't manage our time. Time just moves beyond us. So thank you so much for that conversation. And to listeners out there, if you have other questions that you want to ask Alistair, so Alistair just mentioned to us as well, do search for him on LinkedIn. That's the best place to get in contact with him. That's the link right there. Or you can just search for Alistair Gordon on LinkedIn. Right. And perhaps you can tag Alistair on a question and he can get back to you when time permits. That'll be a great way to connect with Alistair. And also another thing that we want to sort of ensure that you remember is, of course, the book that is out there from Alistair. Can we have the book on screen again? Master Expert, How to Use Expertship to Achieve Peak Performance, Seniority and Influence in a Technical Role. This is a book written by both Alistair Gordon and also the co-author there, Dominic Johnson. So go over. Easiest is to go to Amazon and search for Master Expert or expertship.com. And if you feel that you're hankering to learn a bit more, we've got some articles on Leaderonomics.com. Actually, one of them is written by Alistair as well, looking to improve competitiveness in organization. That was one of the last things he mentioned just now. So do check out that particular article. We'll have the links in the comments. The next one is how to leverage talents of your team to navigate disruptions. And this is actually by us, Leaderonomics itself. And there's a podcast there for you to listen. And this is actually a conversation I had with a BFM. Build technical competencies to support vision. So this is how do you build your technical competencies to support the business vision that is particularly there. So these are some additional contents that you can go and access. And of course, as we reach the end, I need to say the show is brought to you by Nicole and Budaya. And interesting, I just want to bring this point back again, what Alistair said about having the competitive edge and also engagement. And that is what these two solutions are all about. They're digital blended solutions. They're all about giving competitive edge for people to learn and become experts, and also for organizations to be engaged. So once again, Alistair, thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful morning conversation with you on the Leaderonomics Show. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And thanks so much for the invite.
No problem at all. And of course, to everybody out there, thank you so much for joining the Leaderonomics Show. We hope to see you again next time. Take care, everybody, and have a wonderful day.